Maggie Adin was freed during a ground operation in Gaza. She's been reunited with her family. Earlier, Hamas released a video of 3 women being held hostage. In it, one of them is highly critical of Mr Netanyahu and demanded to be released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. Their relatives, though, say the proof of life has given them hope. A Conservative MP has been sacked from his government job after calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Downing Street said Paul Bristow, a ministerial aide in the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, made comments that are not consistent with the principles of collective responsibility. Meanwhile, Labour has suspended Andy McDonald, claiming comments he made about the war were deeply offensive. The MP for Middlesbrough used the controversial phrase "between the river and the sea" in a speech at a pro-Palestinian demonstration at the weekend. Well, the Home Secretary has described pro-Palestinian protests in the UK as hate marches. Earlier today, the government and the police held an emergency Cobra meeting to discuss the threat of terrorism linked to the Israel-Hamas conflict. The meeting follows a rise in anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents across the country since the start of October. The country's top civil servant had no confidence in Boris Johnson's leadership at the height of the pandemic. In WhatsApp messages shared with the COVID inquiry during testimony by Martin Reynolds, it emerged that Simon Case, who remains Cabinet Secretary, said Boris Johnson cannot lead and accused him of changing his mind on a daily basis. The private correspondence in September 2020 was revealed by Martin Reynolds, whose evidence revealed dysfunctional internal politics within Downing Street because of, in his words, Dominic Cummings, Mr Johnson's former top advisor, who will give evidence tomorrow. The police officer charged with murder following the fatal shooting of Chris Cabba will be named publicly. The officer's name and date of birth will be made public on the 30th of January. Their home address or any image of them can't be published. Mr Cabba died when he was shot through the windscreen of a car in South East London last year. And the King and Queen have arrived in Kenya for the start of a 5-day state visit. Charles and Camilla's royal tour comes as the East African nation celebrates the 60th anniversary of its independence from Britain. And during the visit, Charles is expected to acknowledge the painful aspects of the UK and Kenya's shared history. Well, this is GB News live across the UK. That's it for the moment. Now, it's time for headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight to download tomorrow's papers into your cranium, the Sunshine Boys of GB News, Lewis Schaefer and Josh Howie. Well, I can see certain similarities and certain stark differences, I have to say. But
yeah.
Is that the mode you're going to adopt this evening?
I don't know. He's always like poking me. He's poking. Do you remember that movie? You remember the movie?
Yeah.
Poking.
Don't
poke me. Stop poking.
OK, we'll see how long you can channel that. Let's have a look at the front pages. The Daily Mail kick us off with pawns of the terrorists. The Telegraph, Israel frees kidnapped soldier in Gaza raid. The Guardian, Israeli PM rules ceasefire and declares this is a time for war. Rules out ceasefire. And the Times, civil servants wanted to ban Israel from AI talks. INews, Johnson made it impossible for UK to tackle COVID, top advisors say. And finally, the Daily Star, are there Klingons lurking around Uranus? I'm sure they've used that one before. Those were your front pages. So first up, we have The Guardian, Lewis.
Well, The Guardian, Israeli PM rules out ceasefire and declares this is time for war, like you said. And this is what's basically happening is the Israelis are coming in from the north, where Gaza City is, where most of the people live, and where they believed the hostages were kept. And then they've come along underneath Gaza City to block the route south. So anybody they've given them chance or told them they should leave. And Gaza City, the Hamas and the regular people there, they should leave if they haven't left.
You're great. You'd be great in a war room.
I don't know how to...
I mean, you just be like, there's things, and there's over there, and there's
tanks and...
But how are we supposed to know what's going on? The fact is, we don't really know what's going on. No one knows what's going on. Israel has attacked. They've freed already one of the hostages. And this is the thing you have to remember. I know I should be sort of more balanced and everything, but they freed one of the hostages. And that's the whole... This wouldn't have happened. I mean, it would have happened eventually. But
well, I mean, it would. I mean, the point is that Hamas declared a state of war, and Israel is now going in to get its citizens back. They got one of them back. There was an unbelievable thing in this very paper, The Guardian, online. They released when they released it earlier today, the news. They said that she had been released as opposed to rescued. So the way it was worded looked like Hamas had released her. Where they were sort of, to be fair, they were quoting a statement from the IDF, but it was the IDF saying we've released her in this
So
this
are
war.
you envisaging a successful like they terminated the hostage the takers?
Well, we haven't heard the exact thing, but yeah, they got her out and she was being held against her will. So I'm assuming that the people responsible are dead.
They might be, or they may have actually released her.
No. They've definitely no. It's not like they were released. No, they went in. It was a army.
So they're all dead,
movement,
and the hostage didn't get killed.
And the hostage did. So it's a win-win. You know, I mean, maybe they also captured some
footage you've seen of that happening, or
I haven't seen footage, but they've got her back. I mean, the point was that she wasn't released in any way. She was, she was
rescued.
Okay. But the point, but that's how the Guardian represented it. If you don't know the deeper story, that's what you think. Oh, look at Hamas, aren't they nice? They're now releasing all the hostages or whatever. No, Israel went in there and did what they had to do, and she's been reunited with her family, which is amazing. Just now, the 220 odd people to go. But yeah, this is the thing. This is war, and all the calls for ceasefire and what it's like. Israel has to get its citizens back. It has to destroy Hamas. It has no choice. Hamas has done 8,000 missiles over into Israel. No one's ever saying, Hamas, why don't you stop sending the missiles? None of those signs at all the marches are saying, give back the hostages.
Would not a ceasefire include that?
But when people are calling for ceasefire, what they really mean is Israel stop bombing Hamas targets. That's what they're calling for.
And what about the Times?
Well, the Times has also a picture of the rescued woman, but this is quite an amazing story. Civil servants wanted to ban Israel from AI talks. So obviously there's quite a big furore being made of these AI talks, and Sunak wants to put the UK at the sort of forefront of this technology or controlling it. And the idea that Israel would be, as it says here, snubbing an ally is absolutely ridiculous, and it was very quickly shot down by the actual ministers. But whoever suggested it, I would say needs to basically be fired, because it's such a terrible idea. Beyond the fact, of course, like showing support for an ally, an official ally, but also the fact that Israel is one of the technological leaders in the world. If you actually want to make this thing a success, involving Israel is going to be a big part of that. So. Totally ridiculous situation, and for me, further proof of just how embedded there are people within our government, within our institutions, who shouldn't be there, who are using their own politics here against the will of this country.
Yeah, but what you're saying, Josh, is you're implying like there are a few people who are against Israel, and they're maybe in positions of responsibility. It's like the same way the attitude they have about Hamas. There's a few people in Hamas, but the rest of the people are all right. The fact is, in this country, England, Britain, there are lots of people who support the Palestinian cause.
I support the Palestinian cause.
And they're totally against Israel. And they want Israel banned. And it's not just this one guy. There's one guy.
No, I'm not saying it's one guy, but no, I agree with you. There are lots of people, but you'll find that they're sort of embedded within these institutions, within the media, as we were talking about. The guy, whoever wrote that link in The Guardian, that's one of the, and these people need to be exposed. But I do believe that the silent majority of this country are very supportive of Israel. I've absolutely seen the barbarity that occurred, and absolutely realise that Israel has no choice but to go in and destroy Hamas, not just for Israel and Jews' sake, but for the world's sake.
Just to be clear on this story, the AI, the decision or the suggestion that they be banned from AI talks would be purely as a diplomatic snub rather than something specific to the idea that Israel would benefit from these talks specifically. It would be more like because obviously that's counter to government policy.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was never going to fly.
Because there was talk about not letting China participate because they are our enemy.
Yeah.
And they're not participating for the full time. So I don't think it was because of that. No. But you're saying there's some guy in the Guardian and there's some guy in the Foreign Office. There's a couple of guys here. It isn't that way. It runs very deep. I'm not saying I would say I don't even know. How do we know? Are the people of Britain behind Israel?
I believe so, yes. And I believe that people like these that we have talked about have exposed themselves and something should be done with them.
What is the Mirror going with? No mention of Israel on the front.
Well, the Mirror says COVID messages bombshell. If you thought the government was incompetent, dishonest during the pandemic, turns out, well, this is what the Mirror says. It turns out that you're right. But the truth is we can't discuss this, really. I don't feel it'd be inappropriate.
I mean, this is a free speech channel, but the one thing that we're told is not to diss our fellow presenters. That is the kind of rule. I mean, I would spend my day just online just cussing you out, if I could. But now we've got our GBNews teammate here, Boris Johnson. So here's this story about these WhatsApp messages that have been released, and essentially saying that he was indecisive, and that led to some of the.
There was a mention on the Times as well in the column, and Sir Patrick Valance's despair and so on, that he would flip-flop. But there are other parts of it which have been released, which I have to say I find myself with a degree of sympathy for. Of
like
Johnson's,
what?
Johnson's questioning, at least, why are we going to destroy the economy for the sake of the lives of a few people who don't have long to live anyway?
And you're totally right.
That was an absolutely important question to ask, whether or not it would have been the right one to answer, with the implied...
What the answer is something else. But I agree with you.
But it's an extraordinarily important question, and the idea that he is like some kind of monster for even questioning that seems to be wrong-headed.
They're trying to blame the whole thing on him, and they're saying the flip-flopping one way or the other. But at the end of the day, Sweden didn't flip-flop. They were totally against COVID restrictions, and they did quite well. So the fact is that flip-flopping had made...
Okay, if I just made... There's something that is serious here, is that there is evidence that that he wanted to sort of accelerate coming out of lockdown and whatever in lieu of what was happening with Dominic Cummings and all of those revelations about him, his eye test and whatnot. Now, why that's important is because it's got nothing to do with science. It's all politics. And they were playing with our lives.
So you're saying...
this is what the newspapers say.
You have evidence that...
Well, no, this is what the newspapers say.
Are you saying in order to distract from Dominic Cummings, he said, let's come out of lockdown?
That's what the newspapers say.
Because they realised that
it's saying here... it said in the Mirror here, the COVID inquiry heard the PM wanted to ease restrictions to switch attention from the top aide, Dominic Cummings.
Where does it say that?
In the Mirror, sorry, in the Mirror.
In the Mirror.
On the front of the Mirror there. Around the middle.
OK. In March 2020, he wanted to do that, to ease restrictions in March 2020.
Anyway, I'm looking forward to working with him. I'm very excited about his joining the GBNews team.
Yeah, I have no quarrel. Listen, Neil Oliver already made a quite extraordinarily damning assessment of him, last Saturday, knowing that he was coming to the channel. I don't suppose you'd expect special treatment, but I'd be surprised if he actually is on record saying, listen, guys, I'm sorry, but I need to protect Dominic Cummings, therefore we need to change the COVID strategy.
The fact is, he did lock down. He did lock down twice.
He did.
And that's enough. And you're saying, listen to the science. The science was just as wrong.
There was too much lockdown. That's my point.
Yeah.
Finally, the star, Josh.
Yes. Are there Klingons lurking around Uranus? This is really just a story to basically do a pun on Uranus. There's space boffins, because the star obviously likes to use the word boffins. They've spotted an infrared aurora around the planet, and that can be used. But, of course, because we only get the front page, I have no idea how that story works out.
Oh, that's the front pages. In part 2, we have hatred, genocide, despair and twin beds. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Earlier.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Well,
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. So we continue, Lewis, with the INews. It's beginning to look a lot like pogrom in Russia.
Yes, that's interesting, and it's a word that I've known about, and of course we've all known about it, but I don't know, most people have known it, and I didn't think it was ever going to be used again, and it is. Kremlin arrests 60 and blames the Ukraine for Dagestan airport riots as Russian Jews fear for their future. And this is an amazing story, because there's another country that we're going to have to learn about, which is Dagestan, which is right next to Chechnya, which is one above Azerbaijan. And why are Jews flying in there when the place is 83% Muslim?
Yeah.
And I think this is the future for the world, is that Russia, because of the Ukraine, they've had to put all their forces into the Ukraine. They're basically losing control of all the other little, because Russia isn't a country, it's an empire.
But Dagestan is part of Russia. It's not part of the old Soviet Union. It is actually part of Russia.
It is actually part of Russia, but it's part of the North Caucasus, area, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a couple of other places.
So like the United States kind of thing?
No, not at all, because it's a totally different people. There aren't Russians. There are some Russians.
They're a separate ethnic
They're a separate ethnic group. There's lots of different ethnic groups.
And are they Muslim? Or are they just
83% of them are Muslims.
Okay.
And
so just to give the story in case people missed it.
The story is, you mentioned the word pogrom. Pogrom is a riot. It's basically a state-supported riot.
Yeah.
They were Jews coming from Tel Aviv, and they landed in the capital city of Dagestan. And while they were there, they were met with hundreds of rioters who were
The footage is insane. The footage, it's not just at the airport.
No,
you see people marching around.
Yeah.
There's footage in a hotel. There were rumours in the town that there was Jews in the hotel, and they're breaking into the hotel. They didn't believe them.
There were some Israelis on this plane, because I heard they got one guy and he wasn't Israeli.
Yeah, he wasn't. Yeah, they're on the plane. Yeah, of course, El Al, whatever. But at the same. But yeah, there was this man, this poor little man, surrounded by hundreds of people, and they've got his passport, and he's going, "No, I'm not. I'm not Jewish. I'm not." You know, it was really scary, really horrible to see, and it's hilarious that Putin is, of course, blaming. How's he blaming Ukraine for it? What the hell was?
Well, in a way, Ukraine is part of it. This whole thing got kicked off because of Ukraine. Because
well, their anti-Semitism wasn't kicked off.
But you know something? Russia is compared to the way things are going, Russia is one of the least anti-Semitic places right now, and a case could be made that Putin.
Well, I wouldn't say that, mate.
Well, staying within the global reach of this conflict, Josh Suella is adamant in the Telegraph that hate is hate.
Yes, pro-Palestine protests are hate marches, says Braverman, and we had another every Saturday over the last few weeks. We've had another march, and the numbers seem to be accelerating, increasing 100,000, 200,000 or more. In London, I went through them this weekend myself, and yeah, friends of mine, Jewish friends, kids, parents who go to school with, it's like they're afraid of going into town on the weekend, seeing these people. I had a guy shout "Free Palestine" at me on the tube. I mean, that's not the end of the world or anything, but the point is that there shouldn't be an feeling of intimidation walking down the road, a bunch of guys beeping their horns and whatnot in central London.
So do you feel that they should be... I mean, Suella seems to be indicating that there are measures that could be taken, but it doesn't feel like the police...
Well, this is the thing, is, like, she's saying that she's talking about bringing in new laws. Yeah. Just act on the laws we have. We have these laws. Yeah. They exist. You are not allowed to...
But we saw the footage of the police struggling to keep order as it is.
Of course it is.
And there's a huge, as Lewis is saying, there is obviously a huge contingent.
Well, then get the army in, and they'll have to enforce, or whatever it is. But the point is, look, when you start bringing in laws that could curtail freedom of... I don't want our freedoms to be taken away here, but they are being exploited. And there's proof that came out in the Times this weekend about how Iran is actually behind the people who are promoting these marches.
Josh, that's so ridiculous.
What do you mean that's so ridiculous? Did you not read the Times article this weekend?
Yes, I did read it this weekend.
Yeah.
And all these stories all have to do with there's some guy planted here and then there's some country in...
I'm not saying he's not using the actual genuine feeling out there, but the people who are organising these marches...
I guarantee you, with no Iran, these things would happen.
You know what? But maybe not on an organised scale. But my point is that you're not allowed legally to be having terrorist flags up, to be shouting for jihad, except for the fact that the police are like, oh no, jihad actually kind of means a spiritual struggle or whatever, whilst there are posters saying Muslim armies and whatnot. It's ridiculous.
And Lewis, on this last story on this thing, we have Andy McDonald from The River to the Sea.
Oh my God, this is like this is the new trans issue for us as Israel. Labour MP Andy McDonald suspended for shouting between the rivers and the sea in a pro-Palestine speech. I listened to a bit of it. It was quite extreme. He's the Middlesbrough MP, and
is he an old Corbynite? Would you say?
I don't know really, but he's been suspended from the whip. I mean, both of these stories, his last two, it just shows how much control the political system is sort of centralized.
I mean, I suppose you would have to say, not that it's coincidence, I mean, it's exactly what was in mind, but it is obvious that this was the issue which it was most urgent for Starmer to demonstrate he had expunged from Labour, this a certain Hamas sympathy.
Right, but the problem is that there are millions of people in this country who are against Israel.
Say who are they?
I'm not going to say who are they. You say who are they.
I will say that.
Well, you mean Muslims?
Yes, there's a large contingent of them Muslims.
I think there is also, and this is not to lend my support to them, but I think there's also a young, what they regard as progressive group who see Israel as... They correlate
Westernised,
Israel with... exactly, and the oppressor and
colonised, except for that's where Jews come from or whatever, exactly.
No, I understand your...
No, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, but it's not simply,
I agree.
imported hate. hatred.
Yeah, well, it's the two together is what I'm saying, and I believe the far left act as shields for that. And you have ridiculous things like Queers for Palestine. They go there, they'd be hung off buildings. But back to this particular story, what he's been suspended for is for saying between the river and the sea. Now, it's a bit more complicated than that. There's two things. First of all, he used only part of that saying and then was saying he wants everybody to be... But in the traditional sense, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is a call to genocide. In that, what's in between the river, Jordan, and the sea is Israel. So when they say for it to be free, they mean free of Jews, free of Israeli Jews and whatnot. And this is the other thing, is there's so much talk on the left of microaggressions, right? Like, oh, people perceive it like this, so you shouldn't use that because it's a micro... this and that. Well, guess what? Basically, all Jews know that it's a call for genocide, yet you're still happy to go out there and go, no, that's not how I'm saying it. Well, if you actually care about an ethnic group and how they perceive your harmful words, why aren't you then adopting it?
Over to the Mail now, Josh. A novel approach to cut reoffending would be to ignore the original offence.
Sure is, yeah. Burglars and drug dealers to get given a clean record and will not have to inform employers about their past crimes under plans to cut reoffending. So the way it is now is if you get sentenced to custody for like 6 months, then for a couple of years afterwards, you basically have to, if you go seek employment, you have to tell them, I was in jail. And that goes up, I think if it's up to over 4 years, you have to tell them forever. Now what they're going to do is actually cut that down, and for people up to 4 years and above, it's for 7 years afterwards. Basically, as long as you don't commit a crime, then you basically, it's like your record gets wiped in a way. So there's two things that are quite interesting here. First of all, if they do this, as they seem to be doing, and their reason for doing it is because that it stops people from being getting jobs. Yeah, exactly. And then that is going to be more likely that people are going to reoffend, and that costs us obviously a lot of money, and it's bad for society and whatnot. So I can see the reasoning there, but that's to say that someone who's made these decisions in the past, for whatever reason, if they might not commit a crime for a few years, and then they're in a position of authority, maybe they commit fraud. So when someone finds out, wait a minute, this person had been in jail before, but I wasn't told because the government had changed policy. Well, who's going to get the blame then? The other thing is you've got a pincer movement here of the police and the CPS, like basically... police not arresting and doing their job and getting people in jail. You've got the CPS not doing their job either and prosecuting. Then, when they do get prosecuted, they're not going to jail. So actually, it's all moot anyway because no one's going to jail.
Lewis?
I don't want to say it, but I agree with you. I agree with you. Eventually...
You've got a hair on, let me just get that.
Oh, thank you very much, personal grooming. Basically, it's a double punishment. Somebody goes to jail and then they can't get a job afterwards. I think people have a right to know if someone's committed a crime and went to jail. If you're hiring someone, they've got a right to know.
You haven't told anyone, have you?
I guess it would depend, would it, partly on what kind of crime it was? Like, if somebody was... I mean, if we're talking about a serious offence...
They did say sexual offence like that will forever be on their record.
There's a part of me is like, I do have a suspicion that a lot of crimes committed when you're young and foolish, you do just tend to burn off. By the age of 25, you could have a clean record after that. If you commit a crime at 35 and you're out again at 38... kind of feel like
it should be forever.
They're in the system. Chopper styling.
Well, maybe that's why I'm on my best
halfway. The second half, we have decolonising space, the trans Welsh, and policing the language in France. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie, second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners, not Hodliners. An entirely different show. The Telegraph now, Josh. The constellations are the latest thing to be decolonised.
Indeed. BBC presenter warns against science being just done by European white guys. This is the presenter of The Sky at Night, Dr. Maggie Adin Pocock, and she made history as the show's first black presenter. I don't know how many presenters they had over the years.
It was just Patrick Moore before, was it, for like 87 years or something?
They make a big deal of it. She made history as the first black presenter. Yeah. Great. I've got to be honest, I haven't watched, so I'm not massively into astronomy.
I used to watch Patrick Moore's
but then suddenly you wouldn't. What happened?
He was pretty eccentric, but, you know, it was an entertaining show. Yeah. It was not particularly politically loaded one way or the other.
Yeah,
but,
she's written a book, The Art of Stargazing, which highlights contributions to the field from ancient figures who are not white men in total. Look, you know what? If I like finding out hidden bits of history that maybe for whatever reason haven't been, but what's interesting in here, and I don't mind this, you know, if she's talking for a call for more diversity within that, within astronomy in particular, or within science, that's great. But what's interesting is she's saying it says here, because someone like me would do that because it's not my culture. Well, then it becomes like, well, if it's not your culture, then that's got really nothing to do with... Then really the fault, if you're going to put blame, if it has to be blame on it, comes from your culture, like not placing the emphasis on the, you know...
there seems to be a slight confusion here as well, and I don't know whether they've deliberately racked it up in order to create, you know, clickbait, but there is a difference between saying that if we don't get more black, minority, ethnic, whatever, people, men, women, gay, straight, whatever, into astronomy, that astronomy itself will suffer from a sort of blinkered view, from a narrowed vision of what the physics of the universe... Well, that's just wrong.
No, it isn't.
No,
it isn't.
Wrong.
Because I think we need fresh approaches. I mean, we need people to look at the moon and to say, no, it's not made out of cheese.
Yeah, exactly. So you can be funny about it, but this is the point. It's not. It's obviously we're attempting to be scientific, which should eliminate the subjectivity of it anyway. The point is that she's not saying that. I don't think. I think what she's saying is. I think what she's saying is that there is a history of astronomy in which there have been other voices, and those voices are not being taught as part of the history, so that black, Asian, whatever people see like they think they see the bridge at NASA or whatever, and they think, oh, it's just a straight white men thing. Well, it isn't. The constellations were largely devised in the deserts of Arabia.
Yeah, and there's stuff looking up at the sky has been going on forever. And the fact is she's a physicist. And anybody who's a physicist, I would trust an astrologist more than a physicist.
OK, independent now, Lewis, and the police are being trained how to deal with journalists.
Yes, pesky little journalists. This is Lucy Frasier, who's it says training offered to police dealing with journalists reporting at protests, because there's been a couple of journalists who's been arrested at demonstrations for getting in the way or whatever, or maybe even participating in the whole thing. So they want to have... Wait, you could talk in a second.
I'm just saying it doesn't say that. It's not for
It doesn't say that, but I'm guessing what it is. I'm guessing why wouldn't they be arrested? Because they're in the midst... If they were taking a step back... Anyways, this is Lucy Frasier, who's the culture secretary. She's going to start training people. It's called the National Action
So this is over Charlotte Lynch, partly, who was arrested during a Just Stop Oil protest. The main thing about Just Stop Oil protests is nobody gets arrested, in my experience. It seems unlucky that the one person they tried and arrest turned out to be a journalist.
And how can they even be, is this question, what is a journalist nowadays? There are fewer and fewer journals and more people who are independent on YouTube or have their own website.
Citizen journalism.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's interesting, but they're also talking about their illegal threats by wealthy individuals and firms that are preventing journalists and campaigners from exposing wrongdoing. So they're talking about trying to shut down more on that.
Yes.
But, I mean, hopefully it'll be in the future when I get through this little issue I'm going with.
I remember when I had my first press card for writing for the big issue at the Edinburgh Fringe in 1992, but it didn't get me into all the shows, They would just show you into the ones that weren't doing terribly well.
Yeah, well, I got kicked out of most of the shows. Yeah. Especially the ones that I was performing
Different issue. Times now, Josh, another little skirmish in the ongoing trans war that's been eclipsed somewhat of late.
Well, yeah, this is really interesting. It's nice to be back in the safe space of the trans...
Yeah, like the old days.
The good old days.
Feels so good.
Oh, my gosh.
Bring it on.
Yeah. Transgender women are women Welsh Government states. So, not that Scotland made a big hoo-ha and tried to put a male rapist in a... did put a male rapist in a female prison and whatever. Now, this is really interesting. The Welsh secretary, not the Welsh secretary, sorry, the First Minister of Wales has proposed a bill now that is going to basically say that half of all the people who are going to be proposed to go into Parliament as Welsh ministers, MPs, should be women, and within that is making the definition of women to be anybody who's undergone a process or undergoing a part of a process for the purpose of reassigning their sex by changing physiological or other attributes to sex. So really, this is like the most open-ended definition of womanhood, because other attributes of sex could be the sexist idea of, well, a woman wears a dress, so if I wear a dress, now I'm a woman. And also, they're saying that you can't question it either. If someone basically says they are a woman or that's it. So it's a really interesting... it's almost like a Trojan horse, where they've put this sort of seemingly feminist bill of let's make 50% of the proposals for the applicant list for Senedd, the shortlist. Let's make them women. That sounds great for feminists and whatever, but of course then they've made within that the definition of woman to be upsetting for women who are trying to take women's spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I'm not entirely in favour of the quote in the first place.
That's the other debate.
So this is a war within a war. It's a war between men and women, basically. That's what it sounds like to me.
And it's not a war between men and women.
And then there's the big war, which is really happening in the world. Is at the end of the day, these little questions of who's more womanly, a man-woman or a woman-woman, who's more gay, who's more... It's like no one's going to... In 20 years...
I wonder how Welsh they have to be as well. Is there any indication that they need to be Welsh?
Yeah.
Well, is someone who's Welsh identifies as Welsh.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's anti-democratic to demand who's going to be in Parliament, who's going to be. Let the people elect who they want to elect.
Well, they will elect, but it's down to shortlist, isn't it? I mean, that's the first... I guess that affects the options.
But that's not the bill. The bill isn't in the shortlist. Are they forcing the shortlist on the political party?
Well, sorry, one more thing before we go on. I just want to say that the loopholes you open up here were really interesting. We saw there was a very funny footage of a tech conference in America, which was for women in tech. And then all these guys, geeky blokes, basically, like me, that show, who then identified as they, thems, like went through this conference because they had this unbelievable opportunity to have access to these hiring of all these top firms, Google and whatnot. And women were like super duper upset. All women, by the way, a lot of them who had sort of she, her in their bios, stuff like that. And suddenly it's like, guess what? Men will exploit it. That's what people do.
Times again now, Lewis, and it looks as though France may once again shame us with its commitment to conservative values.
Well, French Senate mulls ban on gender-neutral language, and this is the Senate is set to approve a law to halt the spread of mangled terms, which they're saying have come from America, and this is one more of the French. They're just obsessed with French, and so
strange that, isn't it?
Yeah, they love their language, and as fewer and fewer people are speaking, and I guess it's like losing your hair. You like it more. The more you lose it.
I wouldn't know.
Anyway, and so I don't know exactly what they're talking about.
It's very hard to find in the article.
I don't understand French, and I don't understand.
You're American. You don't know
these American.
things.
They said there are... I mean, I was trying to find actual examples. It says we don't need to add dots in the middle of words to make it better understood. Well, I've never seen that. I don't know what that is. I guess they're talking about like Latinx or whatever.
Yeah, but there's il and el.
Yeah.
And then those are as pronouns, and they've sort of been replaced by this el. I-E-L.
They have got a new pronoun, have they?
Yeah,
I haven't seen that.
Complicates everything for them. There's obviously this is interesting. With this, it's interesting to see it from the French perspective,
where they have had gender.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that's interesting here is that they actually they recognised this in 2017. They were quite ahead of the curve, and they said, we don't want any of this to happen to our language because they are very strict about it. You know, they have quotas about American movies.
Françoise,
and exactly, very strict on this stuff. So they did a big circular sending out to 2017. But you know what? It didn't stop anything because that's the point. These people are embedded with these institutions. So what are they having to do now? They're having to write it into law.
They're not embedded. You are like obsessed with this.
Yes, I am obsessed.
It's, you know, it's like saying a fish is embedded in the water. It's the water. It's the flood of Team World.
I would agree with that. With the language is unfortunately not something that is controlled top down. It is it bubbles up, doesn't it? From
and
the street.
It bubbles sideways. It bubbles. It comes.
I mean, I deplore the rise of what do they call it? London multicultural or something like that. This is the new accent that everyone speaks now, and there's loads of slang terms and there's loads of strange slight vowel sounds.
When you
that's
see
how kids speak.
Pregnant person replaced instead of woman. Used in the NHS, that is a top-down.
Nobody is using that like conversation.
No, not for the ground up. No, but that's what I'm saying. It's a top-down thing from these fish.
Yeah, the fish. It's lots of fish, and they all go.
Expansion of the electorate to include the British diaspora now, Josh. That's likely to be significant, is it, in The Guardian?
Yeah, Britons living overseas for over 15 years likely to win voting right before the next election. This is a guy who lived to 101. He forced it through Schindler, a man called Schindler, and he died, Harry Schindler, and no jokes. And yeah, it turns out there's 3 million voters out there who this will apply for, which is a significant chunk. Yeah. I'm wondering if the Tories are putting this through because they've maybe done some polling that a significant part of them have this.
Because the way that we vote in this country is within constituencies for particular MPs.
Well, this is it. You have to do your last, where you live last, where you grew up. There's different ways that they're going to be talking to prove it. And it says like 83% of these 7,000 people who they surveyed would actually do it. So it'll be interesting to see if this has an impact on...
I think they should have one MP that they all vote for, the overseas branch.
The overseas
or maybe 5 MPs, like a cluster or something. Yeah.
Wasn't it that MP who spent all his time in Barbados or something?
The Attorney General with the lovely voice, One more section to go, folks. Horror aerobics, bionic augmentations, immortal jellyfish. It's the science round. Finally, some good news. See you in a couple of minutes.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy
me this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliner. So the Mirror now, Lewis, and a pretty sick joke even by our standards, this.
Yeah, man dresses. This is a horrible story because it's like man dresses as Manchester Arena bomber for Halloween, and pal reports him to the police. So he dressed up as a bomber. It had like TNT and boom on his thing. It was a vest, and he had a T-shirt that said "I love Ariana Grande," and that is really in bad taste, and it's painful for me to listen to because. It's not necessarily a hate crime because you've got to know what's in his heart, but it is basically a comedy crime. It's the worst.
It's like he said he didn't want to. I mean, how can you think he's not going to upset people like that? I mean, I like to think I have a fairly kind of like.
Because you know what happens? A lot of people, they watch the experts doing comedy,
right.
and I've said some really horrific things that I've gotten away with in a basement that no one hears.
Yeah.
You know, where there's a lot of winking going on, and they know it's a joke. But so
it's weird though. I mean, the Halloween thing I noticed over the last. We had kids 20 years old now. It's over. Even over the course of the Halloween period that we went through, it became more sick. It started out a little bit more like ghosts, maybe vampires, and then gradually it became like zombies, and now people had...
It's all Marvel characters now.
Oh, is it? OK,
yeah,
right.
But vampires, you're saying vampires are nice. Vampires are dead people who are going out sucking people's blood.
And there's nothing nice about it, but it used to be terrifying. But this is obviously an adult party anyway.
Especially because we're in a horrible time right now. There's enough death and horror going on. Maybe we should cancel Halloween. Not cancel it, just allow it.
Maybe it wasn't Halloween. Maybe it was going to a march.
Yeah.
OK, better news now for horror fans. Josh, this might be good for you.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. Why horror films may be good for your health. So Psychologists have been doing lots of studies. Actually, this is a sort of compilation of a bunch of studies, but the most recent one is that it can promote stress and pain relief because it releases endorphins as you're watching these films. So I think we've actually covered something similar to this before.
I think it comes up every year.
What I'd never seen is a very interesting study from 2021 that I'd never heard of, that fans of zombie films were actually better equipped and prepared to deal with COVID.
Oh, OK.
Because they watched all the films, they extrapolated in their minds, daydreaming what they would do, this and that. And actually, when it came to the time, they sort of got their baseball bat out.
You sync to the level of your training.
Got ready, exactly.
This story is the biggest non-story.
Okay.
Because it says horror films. What horror films do, they increase your production of stress hormones. But stress hormones age you. This is one of these things like exercise will increase your lifespan. No, they don't. Because when your body releases the endorphins, because it thinks you're going to die. And the more it thinks you're going to die, the more it takes away years off of your life.
So you would regard horror films as life-shortening?
As life-shortening, as I do exercise.
I feel like for Ofcom purposes, we should say that exercise will prolong your life.
No, we don't know that. And also, I think, marriage,
we're all engaged in a long-term...
Marriage, too.
It's like Jagger and Richards, you know. Sooner or later, we'll find out which works. Lewis, Times Now, this sounds like an intriguing augmentation for super spies and model builders.
Yeah, well, it's a good idea, except it wasn't done. This is a student has designs on fusing man and machine. It's a guy, this Jasper Mallinson, 27 years old. He's a product engineer from Dorset, and he built a contraption that basically controls your arm to let you go evenly 3D. Left and right, in and out, which is amazing. The only problem is he himself says he can only do it. It only works for 2 minutes. And then when he had to display it, it broke the night before, so he didn't turn it on.
It sounds like a proper shed invention. I quite like the fact that it blew up. I think that's encouraging.
Well, he says it blew up. It could just be, you know, my dog ate my homework. I had my homework, but I ate it. This is such a... I mean, really...
It's rare these days, though, isn't it, to find a single inventor who's at the cutting edge of anything that the world is interested in.
But it's also interesting that he's done it in his shed. Now you have these 3D printers, so you can design this stuff and make it yourself. It's amazing.
I agree, absolutely. Scientists finally addressing the one great barrier to getting the likes of us to embrace interstellar future as well, Josh.
Astronauts just took one giant leap towards having sex in space. What they've done at the International Space Station is they've shown that Lewis wants to get his sign up during the mouse embryo.
Lewis Schaefer, Twitter at Lewis Schaefer.
Mouse embryos basically develop normally. So the reason why they prevented sex, or not allowed sex experiments to take place, is there was a fear that if someone conceived in space, that the embryo there would be radiation.
Right.
The gravity might affect.
So you can have the sex, it's the reproduction.
Yeah,
really.
you've got to use contraceptives.
But you didn't say the most important point, that the mouse embryos, they lasted a whole 4 days. And so that's not a prediction of anything.
Well, no, it is. The point is, during those 4 days, everything was all normal. That's the longest they could have survived anyway. Then there's a whole funny bit about supposedly there were experiments of sex in zero gravity and the positions and whatnot, and then it turns out...
So this is not...
Once it all got me all hot and bothered, then it was like, oh, it was a lie.
But this experiment, in fact, is not determining whether or not you can get your rocks off in space. It's whether or not you can have viable babies.
Yes,
it's whether you can...
part of it was...
Some of them are... I mean, some of them are... Sometimes it's connected.
The fact is, the scariest part of this...
Lewis does it.
The scariest part of this story is women in space. The reason why men went into space, Lewis Schaefer, Twitter me, is the reason why men went into space was to get away
from women. You lost confidence in that.
I did lose confidence because I got a girlfriend at home. She's going to be like totally saying, oh...
Do you not think it is like slightly odd that we are kind of pretending that this is a viable option?
Well, they're trying to argue here that this is the future of humanity, but of course to get to Mars or wherever we're going to go eventually, if we're going to go, we are going to have to be able to do it because those journeys are over 6 months.
One alternative is that we could go into space. No, Lewis. One alternative
but if you go to space, you're going to need a calendar. You're going to need Lewis Schaefer's 2024 Perfect for Christmas. Go to my website. It's Lewis Schaefer's Christmas calendar for the next...
I resign.
I love you so much, Simon. You know I love you so much.
Take it from here.
I'll take it from here. Is that I've got my calendar, I've got my Twitter thing, and I just want to say, Simon is a saint. He's got to put up with Louis Schaefer. You've been told you have to. You don't have to if you don't want to.
50 seconds you've got.
50 seconds I've got. All right, let's go. Let's go with the whole thing. I got more stuff in my bag. I've got more stuff in my bag.
You've got a Tesco bag.
I'm going to be selling my ties coming up on my website, louisschaefer.co.uk, and every time I wear a tie like this tie, which has like kind of like planes, it's a really good tie. I've also got an award that I won. Did you win an award? Which is, are you torturing me? You know I can't do this. You know there's a reason why. That was mean.
15 seconds.
That was so mean. You did this intentionally to make me look bad. You know I can't.
No, it's just start stripping. Come on, mate. Give the women what they want.
So, the show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Tuesday's front pages. We have the Daily Mail, pawns of the terrorists. That's the hostages, of course. The Telegraph, Israel frees kidnapped soldier in Gaza raid. The Guardian, Israeli PM rules out ceasefire and declares this is a time for war. The Times, civil servants wanted to ban Israel from AI talks. The INews, Johnson made it impossible for UK to tackle COVID, top advisors say. And finally, the Daily Star. Are there Klingons lurking around Uranus? No. Those were your front pages. That's all we have time for. My thanks to my guests, Josh Howie and Louis Schaefer. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m. with Josh Howie and Nicholas DeSanto. If you're watching at 5 a.m., stay tuned for breakfast. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. See you again soon. Good night.
I won't do this again.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GBNews.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Tonight we look at the pro-Palestine march that took place in London. Or was it a pro-Hamas hate march? And could we be heading towards some form of religious war in our country? We'll look at today's COVID inquiry, which shows those at the very top of government had serious, very serious doubts about Boris Johnson's ability to lead the country during that crisis. And I'm a celebrity. Get me out of here. Well, it's all over the newspapers. Apparently, I'm going into the jungle for a month. Well, I'll tell you about my decision over the course of the next hour. But before all of that, let's get the news with Aaron Armstrong.
A very good evening to you. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. The Israeli Prime Minister says there will be no ceasefire in Gaza and that this is a time for war. Benjamin Netanyahu promised to stand against the forces of barbarism until victory is achieved, describing Hamas as part of an axis of evil being formed by Iran. He added